The newish cheese of Nissan Australia recently got a bunch of domesticated motoring journalists together and went 100% Rembrandt on them, painting a most compelling picture, I have to say, one of complexity and upcoming chaos, or at least uncertainty, here in the car market in Australia in coming months. It was such a breathtaking panorama, encompassing the sky falling in, the oceans running as blood, the end of the world, Cerberus basically off the chain, and Celine Dion blasting endlessly from the heavens. Nobody I know wants that. To be fair, he also spoke briefly about new incoming Chinese brands and the likelihood of them putting the metaphoric testes of established car makers, but obviously not Nissan, in a vice. Hilariously enough, he even used the interesting term, deeply rooted, unquote, to contextualise Nissan Australia's somewhat unique position in our market. Deeply rooted. Imagine that. Hashtag lost in translation. Deeply rooted. I never thought I would utter these words before you, but I find myself sitting here in furious agreement with the new boss of Nissan Australia. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, but Australia only. Website. Code. Okay, so Andrew Humberston is the new boss of Nissan Shitsville, or according to his business card, he's the managing director of Nissan Oceania. He's one of those business MBA types who kicked off in executive management and marketing. One of those. He had a couple of big gigs in Nissan Europe and then over in the old Dart itself, but I don't know what happened after that, because the Brits packed him off to Australia, as they've been doing with people they didn't want since, I don't know, the 13th of May, 1787, but who would be counting, you know? Managing Director of Nissan Australia. What was second prize? Yes, it's a kind of grandiose way of saying you're the country manager for Australia and Sheepshagistan. I'm very sorry it came to this, Andrew. Like, dude, was there an appeals process? Anyway, onward and upward, I suppose. Ahum, and I'm using his rap name henceforth, which I just made up, Ahum recently told that bunch of tame motoring journos who probably could have escaped that there are roughly 70 brands selling cars here in Australia, compared with like early 40s to early 50s in places like the United Kingdom and America. And that's quite right. It is very hard, actually, to sell cars here in Australia. I guess if you're not Toyota. Most people don't appreciate that, having lived here their whole lives and never bought a car elsewhere, but pretty hard for car companies to get you over the line here in Australia. Like, comparatively lots of brands competing for comparatively few sales means the marketing cost per brand per sale is actually pretty high. It's a significant challenge. And not only that, we're 69, 70 plus 12 more coming in. They're saying 100 brands in this country within the next 5 years. That's a very, very, very complex marketplace. The complex triple very with Twist and Pike out of the blocks for Ahum. You don't see that very often from a cheese. Anyway, Ahum also claims that this situation is unsustainable. Inevitably, he says, some of those brands will fold. We'll get to that. This video is sponsored by Olight. Olight's September sale event is now on until Friday, the 27th at midnight. And here are the specials. Perrin 3 is easy to hold over long-distance walks at night thanks to the 90-degree beam, and it morphs into a head torch with the supplied elastic rig. Great for playing doctor or, I guess, changing a tyre in the boonies. Baton Turbo is tiny but also powerful. Awesome EDC torch. It comes with a rechargeable 18350 battery, but in a pinch you can also slip in a single-use CR123A. It's got half a K of range in turbo mode too. Arcfeld Ultra is slimline, so it goes in the pocket easy. And you get a torch plus a UV light and a laser pointer. And it's made of this special alloy that's harder than 6061 and stronger than TA2 titanium. So good luck killing it. The Sphere looks like a toy, but it's absolutely not. It's great for camping and a real winner with the kids, especially in a blackout. It's got app control, so you just Bluetooth it to your phone and there's like a billion different brightnesses and colour combination modes to choose from, and it's a lot tougher than it looks. Seeker 4 Pro is great for camping, comfortable to hold and super bright on turbo mode. 4,600 lumens, and it's got the new generation holster that accepts the standard Olight magnetic charger as well as USB-C. And finally, the Osight, an aftermarket sight for the licensed shooters out there. Essentially, it sits on the top of your firearm and it paints a 3-minute of arc dot wherever you zero it. It's inductively charged and it kind of lasts forever, and you can make easy windage and elevation adjustments. It's compatible with most major brands with the right adapter plate. I'll put a link in the description plus a code in case you missed the sale, and if you click that card just up there, it'll take you to a recent report I did on my favourite Olights and how you can choose the right one for your particular application. Because otherwise there's hundreds to wade through, aren't there? Links to all the torches just mentioned in the description, and thanks to Olight for sponsoring this video. Okay, back to Aham now. He says some of these upstart incoming brands will inevitably fail. Who suffers in that equation? The relationships between dealers and OEMs, but most importantly, the customer. The customer whose residual value crashed, whose parts availability is no longer available. In my view, that's quite dangerous terrain on which to stand and grab the megaphone in front of the press if you're Aham. Personal opinion. According to independent source redbook.com.au, the average trade-in price of a 2019 Nissan Leaf in a private sale is $19,100, and this was a $49,990 car, brand new, plus on-road costs. So not including the on-road costs, that's 38% residual value, which is basically an ownership catastrophe. If instead you'd just bought something a little more conservative and planned ahead, such as a top-spec Toyota Corolla hatch in the same year, 2019, for $32,135 plus on-road costs, the average private sale price there, again, according to Redbook, is $25,825. And again, not including on-road costs, that's about 80% retained value, which is an awesome result. So I don't think the company has to fold necessarily to cause one's resale value to crash, although it will certainly do that if the company does fold. A company just has to produce a crap product to achieve essentially the same result. Now, crap product, what I'm saying there is no demand used equals a resale value disaster. That's a simple equation. And the Leaf is one of the absolute marketplace poster children of that phenomenon right there. Aham says that the top 6 brands in this country account for roughly half of sales. So that's about 600,000 new vehicles out of the total 1.2 million that gets sold every year. And he's quite right on that. The top 6 brands this year so far: Toyota, Ford, Mazda, K-Back Zen, Bits of Shitty, and Hyundai. Nissan is number 9, I think. Aham also told the journos who couldn't abscond safely from this get-together that the top 13 or 14 brands account for 900,000 sales, roughly, out of 1.2 million, which means, I suppose, that we've got about 55 brands competing for the remaining 300,000 vehicle sales. But let's not forget that that's total vehicle sales, isn't it? Including trucks and buses. And there's only 50,000 of those heavy commercial vehicles sold every year, but 19 brands compete for a slice of that pie. And then there's brands like, I don't know, Ferrari and Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, etc., which have business cases predicated on achieving bugger all sales statistically, but to rich, posturing self-abusers. Those brands have to go over there in a silo of their own. Like nobody ever says, I can't decide, dude, the Yaris or the DB10. Nobody ever says that. But it still leaves, I suppose, about 25 or so brands fighting over about 250,000 sales, right? Just scrapping over literally the scraps. And I guess if they all did about 10,000 sales each, they could eke out a meagre living with a skeleton crew of dudes here in Australia, or they could just hand it all over to Croaky and take a commission off the top kind of thing, such as Renault, for example. But it doesn't actually work like that, does it? These bottom feeders include Honda, which fell from grace over several recent years. Like, this is a long-term disaster, Honda. And they only sell about 14,000 cars here now, today. Jeep is in this category too. They were pretty high at one time recently, but over many years now, they've just fallen again and again and again. They fell again this year. Last year was terrible, as was the prior year. And if they're lucky, they're going to crack 2,000 sales at the end of this year. This is an all-new definition of the word lucky, I note. Perhaps there are still 2,000 Jeep buying idiots out there somewhere in this country. To me, that's flat out amazing. But all the Stellantis brands are pretty screwed here now. When you look at the sales data objectively, Stellantis is a nothing burger with no fries and an empty paper cup at this point. Genesis makes beautiful cars that nobody wants, seemingly. Their sales are down from nothing, and they're down 24% this year. They're going to be lucky, quote unquote, to hit 1,500. But they don't really have to perform, I suppose, because they're being propped up by Big Brother, aren't they? Jaguar is dead in the water too, at long last. And this is just before we're going to be letting in another 12 cheapies from China, like Aeon and GAC, JAC, JQ, Leap Motor, Xpeng and Zeekr, just to name a few. Photon's coming back too. Imported by Croaky. Be still, my beating heart. I can't wait for Photon 2.0. How long would you give that? A couple of weeks, I suppose. I guess the upshot of all of this is, for example, GWM lobs with the new Tank 300 a few months ago and then the Tank 500. And if they hadn't lobbed, some of those buyers might have gone with a Jeep instead. And 100 sales is something Jeep really cannot afford to lose right now. Whereas if Toyota lost 100 RAV4 sales to GWM, nobody would be able to measure it, you know? But I don't know why someone like Ahum would start flapping his chops on this issue to the press. It seems unsafe. It eludes me why, in any case. See, Nissan is one of those brands on the endangered species list. Not as far gone as Honda, obviously, where Dr. Kevorkian's expected to make a house call any frickin' day now, but Nissan is still pretty sick. Nissan stopped manufacturing cars here in Australia in 1992, so that's pretty much ancient history now. At the highest level, the company then had what I would categorise as a brain aneurysm during the GFC, and they never fully recovered, which is quite sad because back then they were something. In 2013, they sold almost 77,000 cars here. And in doing so, they captured almost 7% of the market. Let's fast forward 10 years now to the end of 2023, shall we? 39,000 cars and just over 3% of the market. That's a frickin' apocalypse for a major Japanese car maker that had traction and cred in this country. Their lineup today is atrocious, in my view. The Leaf is dead in the water in a market that's drowning in EV incentives and green virtue. So what's holding it back? It's got to be itself or them. The Leaf is what, after all, an American would call the OG EV, isn't it? Then there's the Duke. Like, you can't stop the music, dude. Nobody can stop the music. Make me the case for actually buying a Duke. To pull the float in the Mardi Gras? Like, yeah, approved. Ideal. Next, the Pathfinder. Total dog that nobody wants. Pathfinder sales are down 61% this year. It's a new model too. To be fair, mostly the old model, admittedly, but they sexed it up quite a lot. Pathfinder sales so far this year, 430. Toyota Kluger, 6,964. It's kind of says it all, really. X-Trail is pretty popular for Nissan, and I guess they also sell a few Qashqais to people who can't quite, stretch up to an X-Trail. X-Trail is Nissan's sales hero in Australia, but even there, RAV4, Outlander, CX-5 and Tucson basically kill it on sales and then they spit in its grave. So there's that. Patrol is, I suppose, poverty alternative to a Land Cruiser, but it's about to be retired, so I don't know if that's good or bad. They sell a few Navaras too, but to be frank, a Toyota Hilux, the 4x4, they sell 5 of those for every 4x4 Navara. And Ford sells more than 6 Ranger 4x4s for every Navara. It's amazing. Triton, D-Max, even the BT50 4x4 outsell the Navara. Navara does outsell the fake Ranger or Amarok from the filthy emissions cheats in Wolfsburg, so, I guess that's something via Certifica. The point I'm making here is these comments to the press made me think about, well, how's Nissan going today kind of thing. And if I were AHUM staring at those sales figures, I'd probably talk to that assembled throng of journalists about the weather or anything else. I wouldn't open the door to enquiries of this nature, but I'm kind of glad he did because it is interesting. Kind of a PR disaster, but interesting. The one clarification I'd make about Nissan here is it's not increased competition marginalising Nissan incrementally over more than a decade. That's not the mechanism in play here. It's a cascade of crap decisions, a conga line. Crap product decisions, crap sales decisions, and crap marketing decisions, overseas and here in Australia. Plus, they are fairly poor at customer care. At least that's my take on the communications I get from actual owners who have problems. And this kind of makes it hard to retain customers who might have otherwise returned. Being hacked last year and handling that pretty poorly, personal opinion, that probably didn't help either. AHUM doesn't see it that way, unsurprisingly. To be fair, he's new. I think it's been a missed opportunity to just share the authenticity that we have on being a committed investor in Australia and arguably the most authentic brand in this market, given all of these components in terms of Australianness. Okay, so without wanting to be too much of a total prick, although, it is my superpower, I'd argue that ceasing to build cars here 32 years ago and still operating a vestigial casting plant on the outskirts of Melbourne is hardly committed investment in Australia. It's just not. It's like one hand on the ripcord. Leaving out the nebulous concept of authenticity, okay? Except to say, go to any Outback pub, dude, and count the frickin' Toyotas. Like, authenticity. I'd suggest that the real missed opportunity for Nissan was the missed opportunity to keep its eye on the commercial ball, the missed opportunity to keep pace on R&D with Toyota, Mazda, Hyundai and K-backwards N, and the missed opportunity to make some decent calls here in Australia. I think it's fair to say we're actually quite deeply rooted in the Australian history. On this, finally, Your Royal Humness, we agree. Furiously, dude. In the context of Australian history, Nissan is deeply rooted indeed. But not as deeply rooted as the brand is about to be when those 12 incoming upstarts from China actually get here, open up shop and start selling discount X-Trail competitors. That's going to take deep rooting to a whole new level.